My house in Budapest, my hidden treasure chest. Go.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wild Hair Night with Mr. Martin and George Ezra.
My house in Budapest, my hidden
I've discovered
treasure chest. Golden grand piano.
George Ezra recently, though that's not true. Let me stop this. I actually heard about him about 2 years ago, but recently my sons and I have. It'll be next weekend. We might get what we need to get that going. And oh crap, my Kindle just turned off. But I think next weekend we're gonna get into that project, and hopefully, I think we're gonna do the kind of dig a section, level it out, lay some stone. Then lay use those like retaining wall kind of bricks to build it because they lock together. So I think we're going to do something like that. I don't want to get overly fancy, and I wouldn't want to build something too permanent just in case, I don't know how long I'll be in the house, but in case we wanted something else, or if we did sell the house, the people that came after us, if they didn't want a fire pit. I don't know why you wouldn't want a fire pit, right? On a nice, cool summer evening, sitting around a fire with your guitars and playing some tunes, right? That's always a good time. But anywho, let's get into reading, my friends. We are doing a great job. We have 5 chapters. Oh, no. You know what? We have 6 chapters left. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday. So that means Monday we would finish. So let's get right into it and get rolling, right? So Jurgis got up. Oh, last night, right? Yeah, we had this weird chapter last night where Jurgis met this weird drunk Italian guy, right? And the guy brought him back to his house and gave him $100 bill. He had probably thousands of dollars rolled up in his pocket. Stella's going a little nuts over here. She's yelling at me. But Jurgis ends up with $100, right? So odd chapter. But let's get back into it. So we got kicked out of the house. Jurgis got kicked out of the house by the butler. That's where we left off. Jurgis got up wild with rage, but the door was shut, and the great castle was dark and impregnable. Then the icy teeth of the blast bit into him, and he turned and he went away in a run. When he stopped again, it was because he was coming to frequent streets and did not wish to attract attention. In spite of the last humiliation, his heart was thumping fast with triumph. He had come out ahead on that deal. He had put his hand into the trousers pocket every now and again to make sure that the precious $100 bill was still there. Yet he was in plight, a curious and even dreadful plight. When he came to realize it, he had not, a single cent but that one bill, and he had to find some shelter in the night, and he had to change it. Right? How the heck is he going to break this $100 bill? Jurgis spent half an hour walking and debating the problem. There was no one he could go to for help. He had to manage it alone. He had to change it in a lodging house that would be able to take his life in his hands. He would almost certainly be robbed and perhaps murdered before morning. He might go to some hotel or railroad depot and ask to have it changed. But what would they think, seeing a bum like him with $100? He would probably be arrested if he tried it. And what story could he tell? On the morrow, Freddie Jones would discover his loss, and there would be a hunt for him, and he would lose his money. The only other plan he would think of was to try a saloon. He might pay for them to change it, if it could not be done otherwise. He began peering into places as he walked. He passed several as being too crowded. Then finally, chancing upon where the bartender was alone, he gripped his hands in sudden resolution and went in. Can you change me $100 bill? He demanded. The bartender was a big, husky fellow with the jaw of a prize fighter and a 3-week stubble of hair upon it. He stared at Jurgis. What's that you say? He demanded. I said, could you change me $100 bill? Where'd you get it? He inquired incredulously. Never mind, said Jurgis. I've got it, and I want it changed. I'll pay you if you'll do it. The other stared at him long and hard. Let me see it, he said. Will you change it? Jurgis demanded, gripping it tightly in his pocket. How the hell can I know if it's good or not? He retorted. What you take me for, eh? Then Jurgis slowly and warily approached him. He took out the bill and fumbled it for a moment, while the man stared at him with hostile eyes across the counter. Then finally he handed it over. The other took it and began to examine it. He smoothed it between his fingers, held it up to the light to be turned over upside down and edgeways. It was new and rather stiff, and that made him dubious. Jurgis was watching him like a cat all the time. Humph, he said, finally, and gazed at the stranger, sizing him up, a ragged, ill-smelling tramp with no overcoat and one arm in a sling. $100 bill. Want to buy anything? He demanded. Yes, said Jurgis. I'll take a glass of beer. All right, the other said. I'll change it. And he put the bill in his pocket. Jurgis poured Jurgis out a glass of beer and set it on the counter. Then he turned to the cash register, punched up 5 cents, began to pull the money out of the drawer. Finally, he faced Jurgis, counting it, 2 dimes, a quarter, and 50 cents. There, he said. For a second, Jurgis waited, expecting to see him turn again. My $99, he said. What $99? Demanded the bartender. My change, he cried. The rest of my 100. Go on, said the bartender. You're nutty. Jurgis stared at him with wild eyes, and for an instant horror reigned in him. Black, paralyzing, awful horror, clutching him at the heart, and then rage came. In surging, blinding floods, he screamed aloud and seized the glass and hurled it at the other's head. The man ducked, and it missed him by half an inch. He rose again and faced Jurgis, who was vaulting over the bar with his one well arm, and dealt him a smashing blow in the face, hurling him backward upon the floor. Then as Jurgis scrambled to his feet again and started round the corner after him, he shouted at the top of his voice, Help, help. Jurgis seized a bottle off the counter as he ran, and as the bartender made a leap, he hurled the missile at him with all of his force. It just grazed his head and shattered into 1,000 pieces against the post of the door. As Jurgis started back, rushing at the man again in the middle of the room, this time in his blind frenzy, he came without a bottle, and that was all the bartender wanted. He met him halfway and floored him with a sledgehammer drive between the eyes. An instant later, the screen doors flew open. 2 men rushed in just as Jurgis was getting to his feet, foaming at the mouth with rage, and trying to tear his broken arm out of the bandages. Look out, shouted the bartender. He's got a knife. Then, seeing that the 2 were disposed to join the fray, he made another rush at Jurgis and knocked aside the feeble defense and set him tumbling again. The 3 flung themselves upon him, rolling and kicking about the place. A second later, a policeman dashed in, and the bartender yelled once more, Look out for his knife. Jurgis had fought himself half to his knees when the policeman made a leap at him, cracked him across the face with a club. Though the blow staggered him, the wild beast frenzy still blazed in him. He got to his feet, lunging in the air. Then again the club descended full upon his head, and he dropped like a log to the floor. The policeman crouched over him, clutching his stick, waiting for him to try to rise again. And in the meantime, the bartender got up and put his hand on his head. Christ, he said, I thought I was done for that time. Did he cut me? Don't see anything, Jake, said the policeman. What's the matter with him? Just a crazy drunk, said the other. A lame duck, too. He almost got me under the bar. You had better call the wagon, Billy. No, said the officer. He got no more fight in him, I guess. And he's only got a block to go. He twisted his hand in Jurgis' collar and he jerked him. Get up here, you, he commanded. But Jurgis did not move, and the bartender went behind the bar, and after stowing the $100 bill away in a safe hiding place, he came and poured a glass of water over Jurgis. Then the latter began to moan feebly. The policeman got him to his feet and dragged him out of the place. The station house was around the corner, and so in a few minutes Jurgis was in a cell. He spent half the night lying unconscious and the balance moaning in torment, with a blinding headache and a racking thirst. Now and then he cried aloud for a drink of water, but there was no one there to hear him. There were others in the same station house with split heads and a fever. There were hundreds of them in the great city, tens of thousands of them in the great land, and there was no way for anyone to hear any of them. In the morning, Jurgis was given a cup of water and a piece of bread, then hustled into a patrol wagon and driven to the nearest police court. He sat in the pen with a score of others until his turn came to them. His turn came then. Excuse me. The bartender, who proved to be a well-known bruiser, was called to the stand. He took the oath and told his story. The prisoner had come into a saloon after midnight, fighting drunk, ordered a glass of beer, and then tendered a dollar bill in payment. He had been given 95 cents change, and he demanded $99 more. And before the plaintiff could even answer, he had hurled a glass at him and then attacked him with a bottle of bitters and nearly wrecked the place. Then the prisoner was sworn, a forlorn object, haggard and unshorn, with the arm done up in filthy bandage, a cheek in a head cut, and bloody, and one eye purplish black and entirely closed. "What have you to say for yourself?" queried the magistrate. "Your Honor," said Jurgis, "I went into his place and asked the man if he could change $100 bill. And he said if I bought a drink. He said he would if I bought a drink. I gave him the bill, and he wouldn't give me the change." The magistrate was staring at him in perplexity. "You gave him $100 bill?" he exclaimed. "Yes, Your Honor." "Where did you get it?" "A man gave it to me, Your Honor." "A man? What man and what for?" "A young man I met on the street, Your Honor. I had been begging." There was a titter in the courtroom, and the officer was holding up Jurgis, put his hand to hide a smile, and the magistrate smiled without trying to hide it. "It's true, Your Honor," cried Jurgis passionately. "You had been drinking as well as begging last night, had you not?" inquired the magistrate. "No, Your Honor," protested Jurgis. You had nothing or anything to drink?" "Why, yes, Your Honor, I had." "What did you have?" "I had a bottle of something. I don't know what it was. Something that burned." There was again a laugh around the courtroom, stopping suddenly as the magistrate looked up and frowned. "Have you ever been arrested before?" The question took Jurgis back. He stammered. "Tell the truth now," commanded the other. "Yes, Your Honor," said Jurgis. "How often?" "Only once, Your Honor." "For what?" "For knocking down my boss, Your Honor. I was working in the stockyards, and he—" "I see," said Your Honor. "I guess that will do. You ought to stop drinking if you can't control yourself. 10 days and costs. Next case." Jurgis gave vent to a cry of dismay, cut off suddenly by the policeman who seized him by the collar. He was jerked out of the way into a room with the convicted prisoners, where he sat and wept like a child in his impotent rage. It seemed monstrous to him that the policemen and judges should esteem his word as nothing in comparison with the bartenders. Poor Jurgis could not know the owner of the saloon had paid $5 each week for a policeman alone for Sunday privileges and general favors, nor that the pugilist bartender — pugilist is a fancy word for boxer, bartender — was one of the most trusted henchmen of the Democratic leader of the district. Had it helped only a few months before to hustle out a record-breaking vote as a testimonial to the magistrate, who had been made the target of odious kid-gloved reformers. So this guy who Jurgis got into a tussle with basically helped get this judge, the magistrate, elected. Jurgis was driven out to the bridewell for the second time. In his tumbling around, he had hurt his arm again, and so could not work. But he had been attended by the physician. Also, his head and eye had to be tied up, and so he was pretty looking object when, the second day after his arrival, he went out to the exercise court and encountered Jack Duane. The young fellow was glad to see Jurgis, and he almost hugged him. "By God, if it isn't the stinker," he cried. "And what is it? Have you been through a sausage machine?" "No," said Jurgis, "but I've been in a railroad wreck and a fight." And then, while some other prisoners gathered around, he told his wild story. Most of them were incredulous, but Duane knew that Jurgis could have never made up such a yarn as that. Hard luck, old man, he said, when they were alone, but maybe it taught you a lesson. I've learned some things since I saw you last, said Jurgis mournfully. Then he explained how he had spent last summer hoboing it, as the phrase has it. And you, he asked finally, have you been here ever since? Lord knows, said the other. I only came in the day before yesterday. It's the second time they've sent me up on a trumped up charge. I've had hard luck and can't pay them what they want. Why don't you quit Chicago with me, Jurgis? I've no place to go, said Jurgis sadly. Neither have I, replied the other, laughing lightly. But we'll wait till we get out and see. Let's see. In the Bridewell, Jurgis met few who had been there since the last time, but he met scores of others, old and young, of exactly the same sort. It was like breakers upon a beach. There were new water, but the wave looked just the same. He strolled about and talked with them, and the biggest of them told tales of their prowess, while those who were weaker or younger and inexperienced gathered round and listened in admiring silence. The last time he was there, Jurgis had thought of little but his family, but now he was free to listen to these men and to realize that he was now one of them, that their point of view was his point of view, and that the way they kept themselves alive in the world was the way that he meant to do in the future. And so, when he was turned out of prison again without a penny in his pocket, he went straight to Jack Duane. He went full of humility and gratitude, for Duane was a gentleman and a man with a profession, and it was remarkable that he should be willing to throw in his lot with a humble workingman, one who had been a beggar and a tramp. Jurgis could not see what help he could be to him, but he did not understand that a man like himself, who could be trusted to stand by anyone who was kind to him, was as rare among criminals as among any other class of men. The address Jurgis had been given a garret room in the ghetto district, and home of a pretty little French girl, Duane's mistress, who sewed all day and eked out her living by prostitution. He had gone elsewhere, she told Jurgis. He was afraid to stay there now on account of the police. The new address was a cellar dive, whose proprietor said that he had never heard of Duane, but after he had put Jurgis through the catechism, he shown him the back stairs which led to a fence in the rear of a pawnbroker shop, and thence to a number of other rooms, in one of which Duane was hiding. Duane was glad to see him. He was without a cent of money, he said, and he had been waiting for Jurgis to help him get some. He explained his plan. In fact, he spent all day in lying bare to his friend, the criminal world of the city, and in showing him how he might earn himself a living at it. That winter he would have a hard time on account of his arm and because of his unwanted fit to activity for the police. But so long as he was unknown to them, he would be safe, and if he were careful. Here at Papa Hansen's, or so they called the old man who kept the dive, he might rest at ease, for Papa Hansen was square. Won't stand by him so long as he is paid, and gave him an hour's notice if there was to be a police raid. Also, Ronestag, the pawnbroker, would buy anything he had for a third of its value, and guarantee to keep it hidden for a year. Oh, there you go. So they got a couple people working for them as long as they can be thieves. Well, that's not so good, but I guess it's something for Jurgis. There was an oil stove in a little cupboard of a room. They had some supper, and then at about 11 o'clock at night, they sallied forth together by the rear entrance to the place, Duane armed with a slingshot. They came to a residence district, and he sprang up on a lamppost and blew out the light. Then the two dodged into the shelter of an area, stepped and hid in silence. Pretty soon a man came by, a working man, and they let him go. And after a long interval came a heavy tread of policemen, and they held their breath till he was a heavy tread of a policeman, and they held their breath till he was gone. Though half frozen, they waited a full quarter of an hour after that, and then again came footsteps walking briskly. Dwayne nudged Jurgis, and in an instant the man had passed. They rose up. Dwayne stole out as silently as a shadow, and a second later Jurgis heard a thud and a stifled cry. He was only a couple of feet behind, and he leapt to stop the man's mouth, while Dwayne held him fast by the arms, as they had agreed. But the man was limp and showed a tendency to fall, and so Jurgis had only to hold him by the collar, while the other with swift fingers went through his pockets, ripping open first his overcoat, then his coat, then his vest, searching inside and outside, and transferring the contents into his own pockets. At last, after feeling the man's fingers and his necktie, Dwayne whispered, "That's all." They dragged him into the area and they dropped him in. Then Jurgis went one way and his friend went the other, walking briskly. The latter arrived first, and Jurgis found him examining the swag. There was a gold watch for one thing, a chain and a locket. There was a silver pencil, a matchbox, a handful of small change, and finally a card case. This last Dwayne opened feverishly. There were letters and checks, 2 theater tickets, and at last, in the back part, a wad of bills. He counted them as there was 20, 5 tens, 4 fives, and 3 ones. Dwayne drew a long breath. "That let us out," he said. After further examination, he burned the card case and its contents, all but the bills, and likewise the picture of the little girl in the locket. Then Dwayne took the watch and trinkets downstairs and came back with $16. The old scoundrel said the case was filled. He said, "It's a lie, but he knows I want the money." They divided up the spoils, and Jurgis got his share, $55 and some change. He protested that it was too much, but the other had agreed to divide even. "That was a good haul," he said, "better than average." Then they got up in the morning. Jurgis was sent out to buy a paper. One of the pleasures of committing a crime was reading about it afterwards. "I had a pal that always did it," Dwayne remarked, laughing, until one day he read that he had left $3,000 in the lower inside pocket of his party's vest. There was a half a column account of the robbery. It was evident that a gang was operating in the neighborhood, said the paper, for it was the third within a week, and the policemen were apparently powerless. The victim was an insurance agent. He had lost $110 that did not belong to him. He had a chance to have his name marked on his shirt. Otherwise, he would not have been identified yet. His assailant had hit him too hard, and he was suffering from concussion of the brain. And also, he had been half frozen when found, and would lose 3 fingers on his right hand. The enterprising newspaper reporter had taken all this information to his family and told him how they had received it. Since it was Jurgis's first experience, these details naturally caused him some worriment. But the other laughed coolly. It was the way of the game, and there was no helping it. Before long, Jurgis would think no more of it than they did in the yards of knocking out a bullock. "It's a case for us or the other fellow, and I say the other fellow every time," he observed. "Still," said Jurgis reflectively, "he never did us any harm. He was doing it to somebody as hard as he could. You can be sure of that," said his friend. Dwayne had already explained to Jurgis that if a man of their trade were known, he would have to work all the time to satisfy the demands of the police. Therefore, it would be better for Jurgis to stay in hiding and never be seen in public with his pal. But Jurgis soon got very tired of staying in hiding. In a couple of weeks, he was feeling strong and beginning to use his arm. Then he could not stand it any longer. Dwayne, who had done a job of sort by himself and made a truce with the powers, brought over Marie, his little French girlfriend, to share with him. But even that did not avail for long, and in the end he had to give up arguing and take Jurgis out and introduce him to the saloons and sporting houses where the big crooks and hold-up men hung out. And so Jurgis got a glimpse of the high-class criminal world in Chicago, the city which was owned by an oligarchy of businessmen, being nominally ruled by the people. A huge army of graft was necessary for the purpose of effecting the transfer of power. Twice a year in the spring and fall elections, millions of dollars were furnished by the businessmen and extended by this army, Meetings were held and clever speakers were hired. Bands played and rockets sizzled. Tons of documents and reservoirs of drinks were distributed, and tens of thousands of votes were bought for cash. And this army of graft had, of course, to be maintained year round. The leaders and organizers were maintained by the businessmen directly, aldermen and legislators by means of bribes, party officials out of the campaign funds, lobbyists and corporation lawyers in the form of salaries, contractors by means of jobs, labor union leaders by subsidies, and newspaper proprietors and editors by advertisements. The rank and file, however, were either fostered upon the city or else lived off the population directly. There was the police department and the fire and water departments and the whole balance of the civil list, from the meanest office boy to the head of a city department. And for the horde who could find no room in these, there was a world of vice and crime. There was license to seduce, to swindle, to plunder, and to prey. The law forbade Sunday drinking, and this had delivered the saloon keepers into the hands of the police and made an alliance between them necessary. The law forbade prostitution, and this had brought the madams into the combination. It was the same with the gambling house keeper and the pool room man, and the same with any other man or woman who had the means of getting graft and was willing to pay over for a share of it. The green goods men and the highwaymen, the pickpocket, the sneak thief, the receiver of stolen goods, the seller of adulterated milk, of stale fruit and diseased meat, the proprietor of unsanitary tenements, the fake doctor and the usherer, the beggar and the pushcartman, the prize fighter and the professional slugger, the racetrack tout, the procurer, the white slave agent, the expert seducer of young girls. All of these agencies of corruption were banded together and leagued in blood brotherhood with the politician and the police. More often than not, they were one and the same person. The police captain would own the brothel he pretended to raid. The politician would open the headquarters in his saloon. Hinky Dink or Bathhouse John or others of that ilk were proprietors of the most notorious dives in Chicago, and also the gray wolves of the city council, who gave away the streets of the city to the businessmen, and those who patronized their lives were the gamblers and prize fighters who set the law at defiance, and the burglars and hold-up men who kept the whole city in terror. On election day, all these powers of vice and crime were one power, and they could tell within 1% that vote of their district would be, and they could change it in an hour's notice. A month ago, Jurgis had all but perished of starvation upon the street. Now suddenly, as by the gift of a magic key, he had entered in a world where money and all good things of life came freely. He was introduced by his friend to an Irishman named Buck Halloran, who was a political worker and on the inside of things. This man talked with Jurgis for a while, then told him that he had a little plan by which a man who looked like a working man might somehow make some easy money, but it was a private affair and had to be kept quiet. Jurgis expressed himself as agreeable, and the other man took him in that afternoon. It was Saturday, to a place where city laborers were being paid off. The paymaster sat in a little booth, and while a pile of envelopes before him, the two policemen standing by Jurgis went according to direction and gave the name of Michael O'Flattery. I think that's an Irish or an Italian name. Just kidding. It's an Irish name. And they received an envelope, which he took around the corner and delivered to Halloran, who was waiting for him in the saloon. Then he went again and gave the name of Johann Schmidt, and a third time and gave the name of Serge Remeninski. Halloran had quite a list of imaginary workmen, and Jurgis got an envelope for each one. For this work, he received $5 and was told that he might have it every week, so as long as he kept quiet. As Jurgis was excellent at keeping quiet, he soon won the trust of Buck Halloran and was introduced to others as a man who could be depended upon. So Jurgis kept going back into the same place to getting a buyout. And every time he went in, he used a different name. So he gave the buyout money to Buck Halloran, but Halloran gave him $5 for doing it. Not bad. This acquaintance was useful to him in another way. Also, before long, Jurgis made his discovery of the meaning of pull and why his boss, Connor, and also the pugilist bartender had been able to send him to jail. One night, there was given a ball, the benefit of One Eyed Larry, a lame man who played the violin in one of the big high class houses of prostitution on Clark Street and was a wag and popular character on the levee. The ball was held in a big dance hall and was one of the occasion when the city's powers of debauchery gave themselves up to madness. Jurgis attended and got half insane with drink, began quarreling over a girl. His arm was pretty strong by then, and he set to work to clean out the place. He ended up in a cell in the police station being crowded to the doors and stinking with bums. Jurgis did not relish staying there to sleep off his liquor, and sent for Halloran, who called up the district leader and said that Jurgis was to be bailed out by telephone at 4 o'clock in the morning. When he was arraigned the same morning, the district leader had already seen the clerk of the court and explained that Jurgis Rudkiss was a decent fellow who had been indiscreet. So Jurgis was fined $10 and the fine was suspended, which meant that he did not have to pay for it. And never would he have to pay for it unless somebody chose to bring it up against him in the future. Among the people Jurgis lived with now, money was valued according to an entirely different standard from that of the people of Packingtown. Yet, strange as it may seem, he did a great deal less drinking than he had as a working man. He had not the same provocations and exhaustion and hopelessness. He had now something to work for, to struggle for. I'm going to read one more page and then we'll finish up for tonight. He soon found that he had kept his wits about him. He would come upon new opportunities and begin naturally an active man. He had not only kept himself sober, but helped to steady his friend, who was a good deal fonder of both wine and women than he. One thing led to another. In the saloon where Jurgis met Buck Halloran, he was sitting late one night with Dwayne when a country customer, a buyer for an out-of-town merchant, came in, a little more than half piped. There was no one else in the place but the bartender. As the man went out again, Jurgis and Dwayne followed him. He went around the corner, and in a dark place made by a combination of the elevated railroad and unrented building, Jurgis leapt forward and shoved a revolver under his nose, while Dwayne, with his hat pulled over his eyes, went through the man's pocket with lightning fingers. They got his watch and his wad and were round the corner again and into the saloon before he could shout more than once. The bartender, to whom they tipped the wink, had the cellar door open for them, and they vanished, making their way by a secret entrance to a brothel next door. From the roof of this, there was access to 3 similar places beyond. By means of these passages, the customers of any place could be gotten out of the way. In the case of a falling out with a policeman had changed or the lead to a raid. And also it was necessary to have a way of getting a girl out of reach in case of an emergency. Thousands of them came to Chicago answering advertisements for servants and factory hands and found themselves trapped by fake employment agencies and locked up in a bawdy house. It was generally enough to take all their clothes away from them, but sometimes they would have to be doped and kept prisoners for weeks. And meantime, their parents might be telegraphing the police or even keep coming on to see why nothing was done. Occasionally, there was no way of satisfying them but to let them search the place to which the girl had been traced. For his help in this little job, the bartender received $20 out of the $130 that the pair secured, and naturally, this put them on friendly terms with him. A few days later, he introduced them to a little sheeny named Goldberger, one of the runners of the sporting house, where they had been hidden. After a few drinks, Goldberger began, with some hesitation, to narrate how he had had a quarrel over his best girl with a professional card sharp who had hit him in the jaw. The fellow was a stranger in Chicago, and if he was found some night with his head cracked, there would be no one to care very much. Jurgis, by this Hold on. Jurgis, by this time, would cheerfully have cracked the heads of all the gamblers in Chicago, inquired what would be coming to him, at which the Jew became still more confidential and said that he had some tips on the New Orleans races, and he got direct from the police captain of the district, whom he had got out of a bad escape and who stood in with a big syndicate of horse owners. Dwayne took all of this in at once, but Jurgis had to have the whole racetrack situation explained to him before he realized the importance of such an opportunity. Well, okay, my friend. So Jurgis has now turned to a life of crime. Well, there we go. And we are still cruising through. We didn't finish that chapter, but I have a feeling we are pretty close. We are getting there, my friends. So a little extra reading tonight, but that's okay. A little extra reading never hurt anybody. Never hurt anybody. So let's get to the current events today. And I'm not going to lie to you, my friends, that we've got some controversy today. You know, we've got full on politics to talk about today. So unfortunately, over the past 24 hours, 230 New Yorkers did succumb and pass away to COVID-19. So I think the number, did it go up a little? Yes. So it did go up a little. And that's one of the things that Governor Cuomo talked about the other day. He said that one of the things that he is worried about, well, not worried about, but cautious of, that's how I should explain it, is that they've noticed that weekend numbers are sometimes seem skewed. So, this whole reporting system is brand new. They're making it up as they go. We certainly have seen numbers lost, right? Is this a perfect, accurate count? No. And it's not a perfect, accurate count because not everybody that has died in the past few months has been tested. Not every hospitalization is COVID. Not every hospitalization is tested for it. So, somebody could go into the emergency room and they've got a fever and they don't have it, or maybe they're not tested of it, and maybe they did have it, but they fought it out. There's so many different variables to this, but I do think the numbers are probably close. But so the death per day went up a little bit, but the number of new hospitalizations, the number of new incubations continue to go down. But the governor is still claiming that we are not ready. And he's right. I mean, he's making a claim, but he's got the facts to back it up. We're not where we need to be to begin this opening. So tonight I don't want to spend a lot of time going over the criteria, but apparently there are 7 different criteria, or these 7 metrics, which we have to meet before we can start to open up. This is, what the CDC is saying. And we only right now in the Capital District have 4 of these 7 things. So today is Cinco de Mayo. It's May 5th. And we are shooting for 10 days to begin the opening, to begin the unpause. And we only have, let's do the glasses half full. The glass is half full, right? Of diet ginger ale. We're more than halfway there. Let's look at it that way. Will we be totally there in 10 days? Question mark. But that's the plan. Now, one of the interesting things, and Miss D brought this up earlier in a Google Meet, that certain fast food chains are having a problem with meat. Now, I'm not too sure how many fast food chains actually use real meat. I don't really go to a lot of fast food joints. I'm not going to say that I haven't in my life, but in the last 20 years or so, I've really tried to not go there. But apparently, it's a bigger issue. It's not just in the fast food industry. It's kind of all around. And I'll be honest with everybody here, okay? If you came over to my house and I cracked open my freezer, we have one of those side by side refrigerators. The freezer is jam packed with meat. When this all started, I bought meat and I froze it. I bought meat and I froze it. I bought meat and I froze it. And I bought meat and I froze it. And if, tomorrow night the boys and I are going to barbecue burgers, well, guess what? I'm going to go to the store, and if they have fresh meat there, then now I'm going to buy it. That's how we're going to make burgers, and we are going to keep that meat stored up in the freezer. That is one of the concerns that I had, not that cows would get sick, but one of the things that I was worried about is really the supply chain and people being able to work the supply chain and keep food moving to us, right? We're still early in the year for real fresh veggies. We're probably like a good couple of weeks from the early veggies, but we don't really start getting real good, serious veggies from New York State until second or third week in June. So we're 5 weeks from that. But we don't necessarily, like, a lot of the meat we don't get from cows in New York, right? We get from cows that are grown, in the Midwest. So do people get chickens and cows and pigs and from New York? Absolutely they do. But a majority of our stuff we don't get from around here. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not 100% sure that it's going to be a major problem, but it is a problem as of right now. And honestly, if you're not getting your fast food, I think that might be a better thing for you than a good thing, than a bad thing. Okay, so let's talk about some politicking. Let's talk about some stuff that is starting to really make me wonder. So today in the afternoon, I don't know if you guys heard, but Vice President Michael Pence announced that probably sometime in the first or second week of June, the White House was going to be abandoning, or I shouldn't say abandoning, ending the White House coronavirus task force. It was no longer going to be needed, and they were going to be stopping it. So that's one thing. The other thing is that multiple news agencies today are now reporting that a FEMA report, which was a part of a White House report, has been banned from being reported to the public. And what this FEMA report says is that by June, the United States could be seeing 200,000 new daily cases of COVID-19. This is a part of the FEMA report. And again, more than one news agency is reporting that this report was basically the White House said, yeah, we're not going to let this go out to the public, at least not right now. So in June, we're going to be seeing 200 new cases. At least that's what FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is predicting. But we're also going to stop the White House task force in June, in early June. Okay. And this is what Vice President Pence has said. We will be in a much better and different place by early June. 200 cases a day, new cases a day. Now, that doesn't sound like a better place to me. And maybe this report is an old report, and, because we've been social distancing, that maybe the report is no longer valid. But I don't know. Something doesn't seem right there. Something seems off. And the more politicking. So here's politicking for you. Governor Cuomo is kind of, channeling his best, what do you call it there? Passive aggressiveness. And he's telling New Yorkers, and he knows that the country is watching him. A couple national news agencies, when he goes live, they are going to him because they know he's become this national figure. And here's this information that he put out today. Okay. So if you look at, the top 5 states that are sending money into the federal budget every year, here they are: New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and California. New York gives $29 billion. New Jersey gives $18 billion. Massachusetts gives $12 billion. Connecticut, 9. California, 6. So here are the states that are contributing the most through tax dollars into the federal kitty, into the federal pool of tax dollars. However, says Governor Cuomo, the money that is now being given out to states, the number 1 state is Virginia. Virginia is going to get $82 billion. Maryland, $42 billion. Kentucky, $37 billion. Alabama, $32 billion. And Florida, $30 billion. So, Governor Cuomo is telling the country here, and to be quite honest with you, I think he's kind of telling the world, what the heck is going on here? There's something wrong. Why is it that the 5 states that are giving the most amount of money into the federal budget every year, out of those, let's think about this. Out of those 5, those are the top 5 hit states right now. They've got to be pretty close. We know we are. New Jersey's the second most. How is it that Alabama is getting more money than us? How is it that Kentucky is getting more money than New York? So, he's saying, hey, people, what, this ain't adding up. Something here ain't adding up. Kentucky is a state that is saying, well, we really don't have that many problems. We're going to start reopening up. Florida, same thing. Virginia, same thing. So if these 3 states are like, well, hey, things aren't going so bad, so we're going to start opening up our doors, why are they getting billions of dollars in aid to help fight this COVID situation? This isn't about to me, it's not about party. It's not about, and let me look. Well, all four of those five states definitely were Republican states in the 2016 election. I'm not sure about Maryland. I don't know that Maryland went blue or red. I'm not 100% sure, but people are looking at that. Why is it that the five states that are the hardest hitting states, they give the most into the federal budget? Why are they not getting as much money as Alabama? Right? I mean, our population, the population of Alabama, hopefully I won't disconnect this. Hold on. Where the heck is my phone? Somebody should be on this already. Let's look at the population of Alabama. Let's see here. Come on, Google. Population. Let's see. Okay, so Alabama has 25% of the population that we have. They have 4.9 million people. 4.9 million people. And they're going to get $32 billion. So why not? Go ahead. Let's figure this out. Let's figure this out, people. Whoops. Uh-oh. Oh, I can't. Darn it. It won't. I don't have one of those fancy calculators. Well, maybe I can. Will it work that way? No, it won't. I can't figure. I'm just trying to figure out how much money per person that means that Alabama would get. And we aren't even close. We're not even close to what Alabama is going to get. And we've got 4 times the amount of people. So I'm not going to lie to you here, guys. What is going on? Something about that seems a little off. So I don't know. I don't know what you guys think about it, but when, you contribute to something, you're going to, I think that people expect that you're going to get your fair share back of whatever it is. And clearly, New York is by far the hardest hit state. And states like Kentucky, I got to do this too. Let's look up the population of Kentucky. I love Kentucky. Kentucky is one of my favorite states to go visit. It's beautiful. And there's good food there. 4.4 million people. And they're going to get 37 billion. Let's look at the population of Maryland. Maryland, I think probably, all right, 6 million. Florida is the one state on this list that has more than us, but Virginia, 8.5 million. So we have, theoretically, if you took Virginia and Maryland and Kentucky, we still have more people than all 3 of those states combined. And those 3 states combined are going to get $159 billion in aid. And we're not. We're not even going to get close to that. So I don't know. But, this is part of politics. This is Governor Cuomo is putting it out there and saying, hey, America, hey, New Yorkers. And again, I think that he's getting out there on the world stage because people are looking at America right now, guys. And people are really, well, some people are laughing at us. Some people really are. The other day, I don't know if you guys know what Discord is. Discord is like a communication website app thing. So you guys know that I'm a gamer. We're in my game room, board games, miniatures. Oh, excuse me. All this kind of gaming stuff. And a podcast that I listened to, they started, because of all this, they started a Discord channel. So I was in that Discord channel and I was playing a game online with three guys from England. And, we just got talking and introducing ourselves. And the one guy said to me, he said, because I coughed or sneezed or something. And he said to me, he said, "Hey, Mal, if you're not feeling good, go ahead and inject yourself with some disinfectants and you'll feel better." Right. So here's a guy that lives in like Kent, England. And they hear what the leaders of our country are saying. They know the news that's coming out of our country, and they're kind of laughing at us about it. I think I know there are other countries that are much harder hit than we are, they're not nearly as hard hit as we are, but the way that they're locking themselves down is 10 times more stricter than what we're doing. And they're not complaining about it. They're saying, hey, this is what we got to do. We got to keep ourselves safe. So, yeah, I don't know. I think things are starting to get a little silly in our political arena. So one of the things that came out of the press conference today is that not President Trump, Governor Cuomo said that New York State is going to team up with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to reimagine education. Governor Cuomo has already said that, what we're doing is not ideal. This does not work. Interestingly enough, Bill Gates has also said this does not work. And Bill Gates has said there really isn't a way for us to make this work. And if you don't know who Bill Gates is, I'm sorry, let me back up. Bill Gates is basically the guy who, I hate to say it, my friends, but he's the reason for this, right? He's the reason for Windows. He's the reason for Microsoft. He is the reason that home computing became what it became. A person like Steve Jobs really pushed it to another level, but we would not be where we are today without Bill Gates. If you want to think about all these people that are rich in the world, right? Bill Gates is stupid rich, right? I mean, Bill Gates is he gives away hundreds of millions of dollars and he's like, whatever, right? I gave away a couple $100 million, whatever. Doesn't even faze him. And he is an incredibly intelligent dude. And his foundation, Melinda is his wife. He and his wife and their foundation are going to team up with New York to start thinking about ways that we can start to do education a little bit differently. So I'm very interested to see what that brings, because Bill Gates has said this for education does not work. So what does that mean? How is this tech genius dude, what is he going to bring us, right? What is he going to say? This is what we should be doing. So we'll see. All right. Now here's a real nice thing, guys. Today, the Troy ARC delivered 500 meals to all of its hard workers. I guess there was one man, and I can't remember the guy. He owns a business in Troy, and he basically bought everything they need to put together this barbecue for 500 of their workers that are working their butts out, working their butts off, doing everything they can to provide all the services through the Troy ARC. So kudos, there. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, like, I just, I don't know. I think that's what our country is meant to be about. Here's a guy who's got plenty of money, who's seeing that there are people out there that, they're working, but man, they're just working hard. So you know what, I'm going to drop some coin, and I'm going to, for one day, I'm going to buy them and their families barbecue dinner. If it takes a little bit away from me, but it helps 500 families. If you think about, these people are coming home from 10, 11, 12-hour shifts. They're seeing people die. They're seeing people sick. They're seeing people just in these horrible conditions. Then they got to make dinner. Then they got to do their laundry. Then they got to do all the other crap. That they have to do. Well, this guy's saying, well, you know what? For tonight, dinner's on me. So awesome stuff. Real awesome stuff. Kudos. All right, here we go. So on this day in history, ladies and gentlemen, on this day in 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte, in exile, right? He has been in exile for 10, 11 years, I think, at this point, dies. Woo. So Napoleon dies on this day in 1821. On this day, in 1891, Carnegie Hall opens up. So you want to talk about a man like Bill Gates, a person who made his fortune, and he is now a modern day philanthropist. He takes that fortune and he is helping people. He's helping our society. He's helping our communities. Andrew Carnegie builds and creates Carnegie Hall to bring arts to people. On this day in 1935, now this is a year prior to the Olympics, but Jesse Owens, James Cleveland Owens, breaks the world long jump record, and then about a year later, Jesse Owens goes to the Olympics, and he wins 4 gold medals. He went to Ohio State University, and Jesse Owens is a really neat dude. He's a really neat guy in American history. He had a very difficult background, a very difficult time growing up, though I don't think as difficult as some. And when he went to the 1936 Olympics, 1936 Olympics is kind of when the Nazis start to broadcast to the world their hatred for Jews and Africans, people of African descent. And Hitler tells the world that his superior Aryan race will win the track and field golds. They're going to clean house. They're going to dominate in all the events. And Jesse Owens ends up winning 4 of these gold medals. And he goes home and he becomes the first African American to receive a sports endorsement from Adidas, which I believe is still around today. And I read a biography on Jesse Owens. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting was he was asked, Hitler shook the hand of every single gold medalist at that Olympics, at the Berlin Olympics in 1936. And he never, out of the 4 golds that Jesse won, he did not once shake Jesse's hand. And when being interviewed for this book, the person that wrote the book asked Jesse, said, well, what did you think? Did that dishonor you? Or did you feel like you were disrespected? And Jesse Owens, he replied something like this. He said, I understood, and I knew that someone like Adolf Hitler was not going to shake my hand. However, what Hitler did do is that Hitler kind of did a bow to him and did acknowledge him. But what Jesse Owens said he was more upset about, and what he truly felt disrespected about, was that FDR sent a telegram to every American that competed in the Olympics and won a medal, except for Jesse Owens. So while Jesse Owens was off in the land of hatred in Berlin in 1936, competing and representing his country, his own president refused to acknowledge that he was a world champion. So I don't think I'll ever forget that story. On this day in 1945, now this is a very interesting story. A Japanese plane actually in Oregon, I don't remember the name of the town in Oregon, but it had dropped a balloon. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, guys. Excuse me. It had dropped a balloon which had explosives rigged to it. And it was one of the only times that a Japanese plane truly made it to America. I know there was one moment in time where a Japanese plane dive bomber made it to Washington State. And like the guy, you think about one Japanese pilot, like, you goddamn Americans. And he dropped one bomb on a town, and the bomb was a dud. It didn't even go off. But another plane had dropped some kind of explosive or balloon with explosives in it. And as people were trying to get this balloon and drag it out of the woods, the balloon actually detonated and killed six people, 6 Oregonians. 16 years later, on this day in 1961, Alan Shepard becomes the first American to enter space on the Freedom 7. And then it would be 10 years later on, I think it's Apollo 14? Oh, I'm not too sure. Don't quote me on that. Almost 10 years later to the day, he will land on the moon. So Alan Shepard, one of our first and foremost, one of our big astronauts. And on this day, I don't know, maybe you guys will get a kick out of this. In 2002, Spider-Man, the first round, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man on this day in 2002 becomes the first movie in the history of movies to make $100 million in its opening weekend. So we had Tom Holland, or we had Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Then we had the British guy there. Now I don't remember his name. I thought he was pretty good. I don't remember his name at all. There were 2 of those movies, and now we have Tom Holland, right? Who's made, 2 Spider-Man movies, but then he's been in a bunch of other Marvel movies. So anyways, my friends, that's what I have for you today. I don't know if you guys saw, but I kind of became world famous today. I was on the MHS TV News. I don't know if you guys saw that. Mr. Chandler did this. He interviewed me some point last week. And my agent cleared it and said, yeah, it's okay. You can go ahead and put that interview on MHS TV News. But anyways, it was fun to be a part of it. And I think it's kind of cool that we're keeping that stuff going. In our Google Meets today, I know a lot of the seniors were talking about, is there going to be graduation? Is there going to be prom and all that kind of good stuff? And I don't think it's going to be a while before we have answers to that kind of stuff. But keep your heads in the game, guys, and keep working at it. Do the best that you can. Keep your mind and your body physically active, and we'll get through it all. We will get through it. In 10 days, our state is going to start to reopen, and I don't know that we are going to feel the total effects of that right away. But again, like I said last night, what I'm really hoping is that by, maybe the 20th or the 21st, 22nd, that we can kind of go like, hey, the state's been open for a week. Numbers of people being sick are not going up. Good news, right? So that's what we're shooting for, and that's what we need to keep working for. So I think at that point in time, it's going to be a good indication for us. And then again on June 1st, we'll see things start to reopen. More things start to reopen, and a week after that, we're going to look and go, awesome, great. The numbers aren't spiking, so we can start to open things up a little bit more, and we'll get back to our normal routines. So, as always, it is a pleasure to be here with you guys, to read with you. We are doing great on our book. Hopefully, by this time next week, we're going to start our new book. We're going to read some fiction together, and I'm super excited to read that book with you guys. I think you're going to love it. It's one of my favorite books. I've read the whole series. So I'm glad we can read it together, and I'll introduce you guys to that. Maybe you'll even go out on your own and read the rest of the books on your own, which would be fantastic. So run the marathon, my friends. Don't run the sprint. No reason to do it. We're chugging along. We're making our way through it. Be good, be safe, and I'll see you back tomorrow night. Bye, guys.